Thanks for watching. I'm Margot Kinberg, and this is In the Spotlight, a closer look at a crime novel. The winners of this year's Niall Marsh Awards for the best in New Zealand crime fiction have been announced. And here at In the Spotlight, we're going to be taking a close look at each of the finalists, beginning today with turning the spotlight on Jacqueline Bublitz's Before You Knew My Name, the winner of this year's Best Novel and Best First Novel. 18-year-old Alice Lee has nothing to lose when she leaves the small town where she was living with her mother's cousin. With a little money in her pocket and a camera she took from one of her teachers, she makes her way to New York, where her mother used to live. She's hoping to make a life for herself there. A few weeks later, though, she's found dead in the Hudson River. She has no identification with her, so she becomes the most recent Jane Doe, and for a while there's a real effort to find out who she was. The person who finds Alice's body is 36-year-old Ruby James, who's come to New York from Melbourne. She's coping with the fact that Ash, the man she loves, is engaged to someone else. And she's decided to start a new life for herself. It's not easy at first. She still has conflicted feelings about Ash, and getting used to life in New York takes time. Everything changes, though, when she finds Alice's body. She alerts the police and manages to answer their questions, but she is shaken to the core. And at first, she just wants to forget that anything happened. She can't stop thinking about the dead girl, though. Whoever the girl was, she was a real person. Ruby begins to find a sense of purpose in trying to find out more about the dead girl. She reads the news, follows up on the stories, and so on. It isn't long, though, before Alice's murder drops off the headlines. No one's claimed her body, and no one seems to know who she is. Ruby hasn't given up, though. She still wants to know who Alice was and why anyone would want to kill her. She feels a connection to Alice that she hadn't expected, and that drives her. In the meantime, Alice, who narrates the story, first person, present tense, is trying to connect with Ruby, too. She doesn't know the name of her killer, but she knows the circumstances, and she tries to help Ruby and the police to know more about her life, and her death. As the story goes on, we slowly learn about Alice's history, her time in New York, and her murder. So what are the elements in this story? What's woven through it to keep it together? Well, New York City is the setting for the novel, and Bublitz makes that clear. In terms of local culture, physical setting, and more, there's a strong sense of New York throughout the story. More than that, we see New York through the eyes of newcomers. Both Alice and Ruby are new to the city when they get there, and each has a different impression of the place. As the story goes on, we experience the city little bit by little bit as Alice and Ruby tell their stories. The story, though, the entire story, is told from Alice's perspective after her death. So we see how the investigation develops through her eyes. We also get to know Ruby through Alice's eyes. Alice shares her own history, too, as the story goes on. All of this leads to a clear picture of Alice's background, her personality, and her way of thinking, a sort of character development after the character's death. There's also the element of coming to terms with the trauma, like finding a body. As Ruby begins to recover from the shock of what she's seen, she goes through a process of making sense of it and of working through that experience. Before You Knew My Name tells the story of the life and death of a young woman who begins as a Jane Doe and ends up as a person with a name, Alice Lee. The gaps are partly filled in by another woman who feels a connection to Alice and who finds purpose in learning more about her. This has been In the Spotlight. I'm Margot Kinberg. Thanks for watching.